if I was feeling sad about something and expressing that, my 2-year-old might bring me their favorite toy instead of maybe handing me a cup of coffee, which is what I actually want. That will make me feel better.
Right.
Because they're very...
makes me feel better, so I hope it quiets you down.
Exactly.
Hi, Claire. It's nice to see you again. I know we were in person together last week and now we're virtual, but it's still great to see you. And I'm excited for this conversation today.
Yeah, it was great to be together in person. I know we were talking about a lot of different topics when we were together last week. We were together in our Bright Horizons office. And whenever we're together, the ideas just start flowing. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we decided we'd like to talk about on this podcast this year is kindness.
Yes.
And specifically how to raise kind kids. This is something that you hear families say, like, what are your hopes and dreams for your kids? Everyone wants, kids who are successful and happy, but kindness is pretty high up there. People want kind and caring kids.
Right. Yep. I think that is something I talk to parents a lot about when I'm doing parenting workshops, is that I always ask what goals parents have for their children. And it is inclusive of just being good people, and being a good person includes being a kind person. But sometimes we don't intentionally do the things we need to do to help children develop kindness or develop into kind people, or we don't even know how to do that. So I am excited to talk about it today because we can be very intentional and purposeful about it, and usually with very good results.
Yeah. So this is one of those parenting topics that if there was one specific, surefire, 100% strategy that worked every time to influence your child to be kind, we would all already know about it. Like, I'd be a bazillionaire writing books. I'd be on Oprah. I'd be on every talk show in America telling everyone this. I've figured it out. This is the one way to raise a kind kid. It's not that black and white. It's not that simple. But there are things and strategies we're going to talk about today that will help encourage it. You can be an influencer. We talk about parents being influencers.
Influencers, the first and most important influencer. And actually, when you started saying that, I was thinking that that's what you were going to say, is that the most surefire way. So it's not a guarantee, but right, parents, the adults in a child's life, the role models are the most important part of this equation. What you do, what you say, what you model, they're always watching, as we know. So yes, that's a big part of it. But it's not a guarantee, and there's so many other things to do as part of your family rituals and routines and just how you behave as a family together. But we're going to get into that in a little bit. Let's talk about why, how this develops, because a lot of times kids feel pretty selfish.
Yes. So at what age? I get this question a lot from parents in parenting workshops. Is like, at what age do I need to start thinking about this? And the good news is, right now, right today, it doesn't actually matter wherever you are. Right. If you are listening to this podcast and you have a newborn, great. This is a great time to start thinking about it, because what we know about kindness is that the foundation of it comes, as you said, Rachel, from those relationships early in life. So those first 5 years of life are the foundation for building those kindness habits. That warmth, that nurturing that parents and caregivers provide is really fundamental to having a kind kid someday.
Yeah. Yeah. And we often say things to kids that are about being kind, like gentle hands or use your words, or we don't do this in our family. But sometimes those are said in response to when something goes awry. And they're sometimes said in an elevated way. I remember being at a family reunion and hearing one of my cousins just screaming across the parking lot at one of their kids saying, "We don't talk like that in our family." I'm like, what kind of you are right now? So it is, we have to model the things, but also think really carefully about what we're saying. So when you're talking about infants, we often start doing gentle hands, but we want to make sure we show them what that looks like, because they don't know what that means. So we have to model it and practice it and reward it. But one thing parents ask me about, Claire, I wonder if this is true for you, is that it looks like infants have empathy sometimes. They'll cry when another baby's crying, or they'll hand someone their blanket or their favorite toy, maybe when they're toddlers, and it looks like they have full baked empathy because they're doing those things, but it is not full baked empathy. quite yet. It's the beginning.
No.
It's the beginning seeds of it, but it is
Yeah.
something called affective empathy, where they feel it, but they don't have perspective yet. And they're not doing
Right.
a very cognitive approach to, well, that person feels sad and I understand how that feels. And therefore I will do this for them. They're more thinking, right, that egocentric, when that person cries, it makes me want to cry.
Yeah. It's more like a 2-year-old. If I was feeling sad about something and expressing that, my 2-year-old might bring me their favorite toy instead of maybe handing me a cup of coffee, which is what I actually want. That will make me feel better.
Right.
Because they're
this
very
makes me feel better. So I hope it quiets you down.
Exactly. So what we know about this is a great time to acknowledge that if you are a parent of a very young child, that those 1s and 2s and 3s especially, and you're sitting here or you chose this podcast because you're worried that your child is not the kindest child at the moment, please know that that's totally developmentally appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in their kindest phase of life because they haven't really figured it out yet. They're very self-focused in early childhood. That is by design. We've said this on this podcast before. They have to be to learn all the things they have to learn. They're not the most interested in other people's feelings yet. They're not super interested in being kind yet.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming.
Right, first step. Absolutely. They're egocentric and selfish and all the words that sometimes probably pop into your mind when your toddler is just not cooperating and hoarding everything for themselves and saying mine, 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 mine all the time. That is an important phase of development. The other thing that sometimes makes it feel like they're not very kind in the early years is they're really blunt. They say what is on their mind and they don't care who else is hearing it. And because they don't have all this adult stuff being carried around with them. So they don't have, again, empathy or perspective taking, which comes with this concept of theory of mind. So they can't say to themselves, if I say this out loud, I could hurt someone else's feelings. So they might say something in the bathroom, in a public bathroom, that is so embarrassing and it feels like they don't know how to be kind. Or I just remember a couple times my kids asking blatant questions in front of people or about people. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I have to model how to handle this. And it's so embarrassing. But it doesn't mean that they're not kind. It just means that they don't understand all of the feelings of others and they're not holding back, or they're not able to regulate and say, that's not a question for right now. And again, developmentally appropriate, and doesn't mean they're not kind or have the capability of being kind. They're, more importantly at this age, curious, and they want to learn about everything.
Yes. And we should be encouraging that curiosity at every moment we can as parents and caregivers. But wow, it really does test your sturdiness as a parent when you're in the checkout line at the supermarket and your child starts asking very honest, unkind, what can be viewed as unkind questions about the person in front of you in line. It's really, we've all had that experience. Yeah. I think
and instead of shushing it, right? That's right. What you're saying is, this is a moment you've been given, whether you want it or not, to model how to get through that moment. I was telling one of my daughters last night about that we were doing this topic, and she was even remembering a couple times that she asked a question that was it was rough in public, but she also remembered the next steps of it. So that was great that we were laughing about what the situation she put me in, but then she also was remembering how we got through it. So I thought that was good. And that also tells you how long that lasts, because it lasts beyond just the first couple of years when it can start forming memories and retaining those memories. But I do that it's really important to understand child development in that it is egocentric, as we're saying, very importantly, and then a curiosity about things that matter to a child and what they're viewing in their world, without all of the understanding of perspective and all of the dependencies and differences. They know their little world, and the more and more they're exposed to different things, the more their curiosity is answered and their questions are answered, but the less likely they are going to be confronted by things that they don't understand or are unfamiliar with. And then there's also the difference between sympathy and empathy. And sympathy is where you can, and kids, we all develop this first, you can see that someone is sad or hurt and you can feel bad for them, but you don't internalize it. And that's empathy, is when you really kind of feel with them instead of for them. And that is a sophisticated life skill. adults don't always show empathy, but it's really important. And that's a big part of being a kind person is having empathy. So we want to work through these developmental stages in positive ways, but don't be alarmed if your children are doing some of these things when they're young, because they are supposed to.
Yeah, I want to follow that up by pointing out the word that we both keep using, which is the word skill. Empathy is a skill. Kindness is a skill. And I really mean that in the truest sense of the word. We all are all born with that capacity for kindness and the capacity for empathy, but it is something that we need to be taught. And the way that we teach young kids, pretty much everything, are through a few main ways. We model it. We let them play around with it. We let them dig in and be curious about it. And so we're going to talk more about that today, but just, again, level setting that for parents, it's a shaky skill in the early years, right?
Yeah, it is
and
definitely.
as you mentioned, there's some adults, it's still a shaky skill for them too. And we all encounter, and in ourselves as well. Am I kind 100% of the time? Certainly not. I want to have the kind of children who become adults who hold the door open for someone at the coffee shop when they see their hands are full, who, if they're walking down the city street someday, someone trips, they stop and make sure the person's okay. Yep. Those little, I want that to be the kind of kid I'm raising. But it's not something that's just going to magically happen if I just sit back and don't take some action as a mom. So
yeah. Well, and I have kids in their 20s now. And when they tell me about their lives and what they're doing, the things I get the most excited about and sometimes honestly teary about is when they're telling me things that I know are expressions of their empathy or their kindness or how they care about others in the world. I'm so much more focused on that than I care about what grades they're getting. I care about that, but I don't care about it as much. I'm not as proud of what they can do when they're studying for a test as I am as how they treat other human beings. So it is something, and I think that's true for most parents, is that as your children grow up, we focus a lot on the things that end up being a little less important in the long run. So I'm not saying anyone shouldn't care about grades. I'm not saying anyone shouldn't care about success and all those things but we put a lot of energy into those kinds of things, and we should be giving at least the same amount of energy into this kindness and gratitude and all the things that go into empathy. And I know probably people are saying at this point, okay, tell us how we do this. And I think that's what's next.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with some strategies.
Did you know that you can get the Teach, Play, Love brand of learning for your preschooler every day? The very people you trust for parenting advice are behind our Bright Horizons preschool program. Learning adventures that inspire kids to reach their unique potential. One-of-a-kind preschool for your one-of-a-kind kid. That's Bright Horizons. Enrollment is happening now. Visit brighthorizons.com to find a center near you.
Okay, welcome back. We are going to continue our conversation about fostering and encouraging kindness in your children. Rachel, what's our first strategy?
The first strategy is what we've already started talking about, is just modeling as an adult. So you as the parent, this means you have to think about some of the choices you make and the things that you do in front of them. So just like I was giving you that example of one of my cousins yelling across the parking lot about what we do in that family while they're actually doing the thing that they're saying they don't do. Making sure you yourself are using those gentle hands and you yourself are using your words or all the guidance you are giving to your children. So when you're in the car, this is the best example, and they're in the back seat and you're yelling at other cars, that is an opportunity to model differently. You are modeling whether you want to be or not in those moments. So that's just a good example. Or at the grocery store, whenever you're having expressions of frustration, if you could model the talking it through and saying, that person that just went in front of us, I wonder, maybe they're having a hard day, or maybe they're in a rush, or maybe they have someone waiting for them that can't wait. So we're going to just let them go ahead of us. We're going to assume good intent. You could say that out loud. It can help you through it, because you might not be feeling that or knowing that either. Or we'll keep going in the grocery store. If you see someone behind you with a basket that only has a couple things, you could say, would you like to go in front of me when you have the time for that? And just find the times that you can model treating other people with kindness and demonstrating that it really is no hardship on you to be able to do that. So just thinking about that, they're learning a lot from what you do. more than what you say. Unfortunately,
Yes.
that is true. So just think about those times that you are struggling with expressing kindness. And I know you said this before the break, Claire, but it probably deserves a revisit in that we all struggle with it sometimes. It is when we have competing priorities and the part of our brain flares up that feels like there's a threat to something. So we feel like we're being treated unjustly or unfairly. And you know who feels like that most of the time? Our little 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds. They are very focused on equity and fairness. And so they flare up quickly if they feel like something's not fair to them. So just even teaching them about that and equity versus equality and fairness and what fairness really looks like. And again, saying, well, this person maybe looks like they need a little help. And so we also are holding heavy groceries, but this person, maybe we just hold the door for them, or whether we know they need help or not, we just hold the door for them. Making sure that you're narrating your thoughts and labeling your labeling your feelings and your emotions, and just always being out there, finding your moments that you can be kind to other people and tell them what you're doing. Fill up a parking meter and saying, look at this is fun. We're being kind for someone else, and just being really, overt about it. So your children don't miss it. You don't want to be doing it. Yeah, certainly you're doing it for good reason yourself. You're not doing it just for a parenting strategy, but don't miss the parenting opportunity.
Yeah, you're pointing out something really important here, which is modeling kindness, but also making it a very clear family value. Mm-hmm. And that's a really tricky thing. I know, especially for our listeners of this podcast who might have younger families. Maybe you haven't quite figured this out yet. Like, what are our family values? Some of you might have a religion or a faith that helps you determine those. And if you do, that's wonderful. But if you don't, it's still worth a good think. Like, what things do we value in our family? So the way I've done that in my family is to kind of kick up a fuss about it in a good way, like really pointing out in our family, we fill in the blank. So kindness has always been one of the things that's been a family value. And doing all those things that you just said, Rachel. So modeling it for myself, right? When I'm checking out at the supermarket, looking the cashier in the eye and saying, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, right? My kids are watching that over and over, week after week. Those little tiny acts of like little tiny bits of kindness sprinkled around, but also the bigger ones, like the random acts of kindness that you just mentioned are huge. And label it, say, I'm doing something kind for the person whose meter ran out and dropping a quarter in here or whatever it is. I know it might feel a little like kind of cheesy to say it out loud, to label it, but it children love it. They love categorizing things, and they like to be noticed when they're being kind, right? So don't be shy about saying, you used such kind words today when you ordered your French fries from the waitress. I really noticed how polite and kind you were. That really, really warmed my heart, and I hope it made you feel great too. I know it's a little cheesy, but kids really like it. Yeah, when you point that stuff out.
Yeah, and they put that positive recognition. You don't want to incentivize things like this because you want them to build this intrinsic motivation that this is rewarding, that this is an important value, that they enjoy it, that they get something positive out of it. And we all get something positive out of doing something good for others. So the more that they get that natural feeling of being able to do it, the better it is. So I loved your idea about the random acts of kindness. I know we were talking about that and having kids get in on it, but you can even say, like, what's your kindness thing you're going to do this month? We can all decide as a family, what's the kindness thing? Let them choose and get involved in it. I used to do, when I had fewer birthdays, we used to do a thing where we would do as many planned acts of kindness with a few random ones thrown in there during my birthday week. Now that it's gotten too many birthdays, we do fewer of them. We don't try to get to as many, but that was a way I wanted to celebrate my birthday, doing kind things for others. So we would just be on the lookout everywhere for kind things, or like, you held a door open. Okay, check, we got one. Or you put a card away. Check, we got one. Or you asked someone. And then it just was so much fun. We were having a good time with it as well. But then you really find the places to do it. And the one way that you already mentioned this, but I want to call it out, one thing we don't think about that is such an act of kindness is telling someone that you're grateful or thankful for them.
Yes.
That is such an act of kindness, and people don't get that enough or give it to each other enough. And it fills you up with so much positivity and joy, and your children up too. So even like your pediatrician or the server at the restaurant or whoever you want to do, that is an act of kindness in and of itself.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think you're bringing us right into our next set of strategies, which is showing care for others is a great way to foster kindness in your child. And again, it goes back to the family values as well. So, having a family pet or being kind to other people's pets when you visit their home, let them see you being kind, show them how to be kind to animals. Planned acts of kindness, such as volunteering. Can you find a place that your whole family can go and volunteer every month? And maybe it's not even going to a place. Maybe it's on the first Saturday of the month, we always bake cookies for the person who lives across the street, who's elderly and doesn't have a lot of family that lives nearby. And we deliver the cookies with a little note. Like it doesn't have to be a big all day thing. It could just be a 1 or 2 hour a month act of kindness. It's a ritual in your family that you always do together.
Yeah, and you can even do it with just toys or inanimate objects. I often will go in a classroom and see, I was kind of notice if the baby dolls are well taken care of, because that's just a lovely way to start teaching it. If baby dolls are all kind of in their own little spot and they're dressed or they have a blanket on them, I can tell that there was some discussion about kindness, and it's a good way to practice, right? If you have a dollhouse or figurines or whatever, if there's some way to take care of something and model taking care of something. And then the volunteering is such a good idea too. And it can be little things, just picking up trash. It doesn't even have to be an organized thing. Right. Of course, certainly we're going to be safe about what we're picking up or having children be part of, but maybe you're just at the beach or on a walk and you see a plastic bottle laying there, picking that up and being willing to carry a nearly weightless item to the closest recycling bin is a lovely way to model, and your child might get in on it. You could even bring a backpack just for that purpose. So when you start thinking of it, it is really easy to do. The one caution I'd give everyone is often we ask children to do something like say you're sorry, and we're thinking of that as how we're teaching kindness. But it ends up being a bit of a get out of jail free card, and they don't know what it feels like to be sorry. So instead, as an act of kindness, when something does happen, you could model something like, well, so Claire's not feeling really good about what happened there. We can talk about Claire's feelings, and what do you think we could do? What would make you feel better? Should we ask Claire what would make her feel better? Maybe we should sit with her. Do you think she needs a Band-Aid? And have them be part of the solution and practice the act of trying to figure out what someone else is feeling in the moment. But when you say, you need to say sorry, they understand that those words then get them off the hook versus really understanding what that feels like. The other thing you can do before a moment actually happens, because it's going to happen, right? Adults have issues sometimes where they need to apologize for something. So of course, children are having that, is use books. Any book. You don't need a special book for this. Any book. You could say, what is that character feeling? What do you think that would make them feel better? Why do you think they feel like that? Just start building these perspective taking skills, because that is the root of kindness. It's hard to be kind to people if you're not caring or worrying or thinking about how they feel.
Yes. So labeling feelings in books. It doesn't have to be a book about feelings. It can or about kindness specifically, just reading any book and pointing out when a character does something kind or thoughtful, or when a character expresses gratitude to another character. I want to kind of, the last thing I want to tackle here is a little bit tricky for families and for teachers sometimes too, which is this idea that in order for a child to learn to be kind, they sort of have to practice being unkind to see how that feels. And this is very uncomfortable for us as adults, right? Kids have to test out the same way they have to test out how fast they can run before they fall down and skin their knee. Sometimes kids have to practice. They're curious about like, what happens if I might say something unkind? What happens if I might, let me just test this out. And, it's important for us as parents when kids are young, even starting really young, even as young as toddlers and preschoolers, to talk about that. How unkind words can be as hurtful as maybe kicking or hitting someone. It's not the same sensation, but it can hurt in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that they're curious, they're little scientists, they do not know what's going to happen. Again, if they can't take others' perspectives and they don't have those empathy muscles yet, they don't really understand what they're doing. So similar to a baby who's sitting in a high chair that drops a spoon and you pick it up and they drop it again and you pick it up and they drop it again and it goes on and on and on. They're experimenting. Will the same thing happen next time I do it? What about this time? They also do not have a lot of regulation, so they can't hold back. They live in their feelings, right? Yeah. And they express their feelings through their body and their emotions, and they have big feelings and they have a really hard time managing those. So those kinds of things are going to happen. And if you have experimenting and you want to see what happens and you don't really have control over your emotions and you feel them big every time you have them, and you don't understand others' perspectives, you're going to do some things that feel mean. It's not intentional. So sometimes people will use the word bullying when we're talking about something like that. And it's too early to use that term when we're talking about early childhood because there's not the intention behind it. And there's all these other things going on that are developmentally appropriate. Certainly if there are two children or there's a couple children that are just keep struggling with each other, that's something to talk through and figure out. And they're developing social skills. And that is something that families and educators should work on together. But bullying requires a level of intentionality and targeting, and that's just not a skill set that a young child would have. So it's certainly something to care about, of course. And we want our children to have friends and have others be nice to them. So it's an important thing to care about. We're not taking that away, but we're just saying that as your child is developing those kindness and empathy muscles, so is everybody else's child in those early years. Yeah.
So if you're listening and you're the parent of the child who has been accused of bullying, and we're talking about early childhood here.
Yes.
Please don't panic. Please don't assume that you've got the bad apple in the bunch. You don't. What you've got is a kid who is testing things out. Maybe they're like more curious than the other kids. Maybe they're more risk-taking than some kids. And maybe you've got the kid who's just really working this through right now. It is really, really hard when you hear that your child has done or said something unkind. I've been in this position as a parent. It feels terrible. It feels like a reflection of you as a parent when your child does something unkind. And it's just not true. What you've got is a regular human kid who is not perfect and is going to make mistakes and test out on being unkind. And then they're going to test out being kind and hopefully realize that feels a lot better.
Yep. And that's right. So they get reinforcement. Kids pay a lot of attention to reinforcement, good or bad, and attention. So one of the things as an educator or as someone who trains a lot of educators, when we're talking about a situation that happens between children, we often advise certainly make sure everybody's safe and unharmed. But then your attention should go to the child that is kind of the recipient of something versus the one doing it. So often we're going right to the child that has done something and saying, don't do that, or you have to come here, or here's what we're going to do. While the recipient of the behavior is not getting our attention right away. But that is somewhat of a reinforcement of that. So again, we're getting deep into a topic that we could go on and on and on about, but mostly we would just want to reassure you on all sides that children are just developing these skills. It doesn't mean they don't have the capacity for kindness. But if you are worried about this with your child, this all the tips we just gave you, just put them in overdrive. Do all the kindness things all the time, modeling it, talking about it, check your own behavior, make sure that they're not seeing you say something or do something that they are accidentally modeling after or thinking that it's okay. That happens to a lot of parents. Nothing to worry about, just course correct right now. But this is so important. Back to the kindness and recognizing that this is so important. This is the skill set you're going to care about long term. This is the skill set we all value in our colleagues and our partners, in anyone in our lives we value. And we want to make sure that we do the things that we can do in these early foundational years that set children up for a lifetime of kindness.
Get parenting advice from Rachel and Claire. You can leave them a voicemail by calling 617-673-8881, and your question may be answered in a future episode of Teach, Play, Love. You can also send them an email at teach.playlove@brighthorizons.com. For more expert guidance on early childhood development, check out our family resources at brighthorizons.com.
Thanks for listening.
Subscribe to us. Find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
See you next time on Teach, Play, Love.
And discover parenting as the joy it was meant to be.